Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bang on Sales show. My guest today is Scott Barlow. Scott is the founder of Bread Outbound, email deliverability extraordinaire, experts in all things email related. So I'm looking forward to this one because it's a bit of a change of pace from previous guests that we've had on. I think best way to open it up, Scott, is yeah, how you doing? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm all good. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. I'm Scott. Founder of Outbound. Worked in the kind of B2B space for 5 to 6 years as kind of multi-channel marketing and what have you. Kind of fell into the email role almost through previous roles before becoming head of client success. I just really had a bit of a knack for it, really. But I found kind of this time last year that email was shifting massively. There was a big kind of meta shift and kind of everybody was noticing the emails weren't performing as they should or as they had been. And it was getting a lot more technical, a lot more hoops to jump through. So I kind of, doubled down on that. And yeah, it's been an interesting 12 months, but I think it proves the theory quite well because there's a lot of changes going on quite quickly in the email world. And, it's still a viable channel, but I think it's been mistreated. And I think we're now seeing the backlash from that. But yeah, so far so good. Looking forward to the next 12 months.
Yeah, it seemed like you must have to adapt quite often, right? Because whether it's spam filters becoming more sophisticated. I'm guessing there's AI on the back end now.
Yeah, absolutely.
About what you're saying and how you're saying it and so on. What can you tell us about that? Because I know that you've had to adapt, haven't you?
Yeah, so essentially you've hit on something quite good there. AI is definitely a factor nowadays. Google and Microsoft, two kind of the two big powers that be, that they both now employ kind of learning machines to, very quickly read and monitor emails and what's going in and out and kind of make informed decisions on what constitutes spam or mass marketing or what have you. So yeah, they're getting a lot more clever. But as you said, it's a bit of a game of kind of cat and mouse. They'll make some changes and then people will find the workaround. And then once that workaround kind of becomes a bit more prevalent or becomes a bit of a problem, they'll do something to, fix that bit. And obviously, interestingly, Google and Microsoft behave slightly differently. So what will work for Google spam filters or Google deliverability might trip Microsoft up. So it does get a bit convoluted, which is kind of how I ended up with a business, I suppose. Because, I'm sure you remember from the early days, you could quite literally load up a sequencer with a list you ripped from any given database, hit send and just kind of wait for the replies to roll in. It just worked nicely. But I think essentially the barrier to entry kind of hit the floor. We're all tripping over it now. But the quality went the same way as well. So anybody with 200 quid and bad intentions, basically, send as many emails they wanted to about, long lost relatives with inheritances and what have you. And I think it just got so bad and everybody got so much inbox fatigue that, the powers that be had to do something about it, which is why, spam filters are stronger than ever. Actually delivering is a lot harder than ever on top of the higher volume of everything in the inboxes. So yeah, it's become a bit more technical and a bit more awkward, but it's the same as any industry really. There's a kind of changes to what best practice is and what works and what's not efficient. And then it just keeps kind of evolving. But yeah, as you say, it's just kind of keeping on the front foot and, experimenting with it really. It's always testing, always seeing what's working, what's not working and just continuing to iterate.
Yeah, I don't. It's probably going to vary based on, as you said, email provider and whatnot. But what are maybe some like top little tips to improve the deliverability? Because I have quite a layman's understanding of this. And like, obviously, if you've got an email domain, you don't want to be blasting out thousands of emails from day one. You're just going to wreck that domain's reputation. But beyond that, or maybe including that, like what are some of the things we can be doing?
So yeah, that's always a good one. Volume is a big thing. Kind of lower volumes across domains, and spread over mailboxes, but not too many. I mean, they used to be the best. Best practice used to be you could have 4 or 5 mailboxes sending so many emails a day, as long as your domain limit was so many. But we're kind of seeing that becoming a little bit lower now. So rather than loads of mailboxes across a domain, you'll have more domains with fewer mailboxes sending fewer emails. So the infrastructure is wider rather than tall, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just because, it's very easy to kind of spot an account that's sending 80, 100 emails a day, receiving 2 replies 5 days on the trot, like every 5 days a week for a month. And then it's very quickly spotted by the powers that be. So yeah, lower volumes are better. In terms of deliverability, your data and the list that you're sending to is huge. I think that gets ignored. People get carried away with sound bites on social media about, this many words and using this framework or that framework, and they're all well and good, and, they hold merit. But if you're sending emails to a list that isn't clean, or a speculative list, sending emails to an invalid email is one of the quickest ways for your email reputation to go in the bin, because they will pick up that you're just sending mass emails to all and sundry, likely to be marketing, likely to be sales, and they'll divert them up the spam folder or end up blacklisting the domains, which is where you kind of have to start. So lower volume sending, data hygiene is huge. And then just, kind of really optimizing for conversations rather than conversions is how I like to kind of put it. So one way that they'll track how, your spam risk is kind of incoming volume to outgoing volume, which is why warm-ups so effective, because warm-up will give you a steady flow of, positive responses into the inbox daily to make it look more natural, which is where the whole warm-up idea comes in. But if you're kind of, just sending a message out to the same person, or the same message to hundreds of thousands of people, exactly the same framework, it's not going to relate to anybody. Nobody's going to respond to you. You're going to end up in trouble. That as much as clean lists matter, segmenting them as much as you can is also important, because it means your message can be more relevant. So the 3 things off the bat that anybody can do really is super clean lists. There's great tools out there for that. You've got, lower volume sending across, a few mailboxes nowadays. I think best practice really is probably 3, no more than 4 mailboxes a domain. And I would probably keep it to between 15 and 20 a day. Just because, football analogy, this will probably make sense to the majority of people, but translate for whatever sport you want. If you're told you can take as many penalties as you want, you get 50 quid for every penalty you score, fine. But the minute that your entire team misses 5, all of you are out forever. Like, it's up to you. Do you want a team of 5 people taking 30 shots? And, how quickly are they going to run out? Or if you've got a team of 3 taking 15 shots a day, you might, over the long distance, it'll, last a bit longer and be a bit better to the domain health. Because I suppose realistically, it doesn't matter how many mailboxes you do have on the domain. It just means how much volume is going out of that domain every day, and what's being sent. And, the more it's being sent and not replied to, the less that, it's going to work. So that would be the way, really. Mailbox volumes, clean lists, and as relevant messaging as possible would be my way.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of the number of, domains that you'd have, that just depends on how much you want to scale it, right? How quickly you want to scale it. Because I'm guessing there's no real limit to how many domains you set up, right? It's just
Exactly.
how do you want to take?
Exactly. You work backwards. You kind of figure out your addressable market, see realistically how many people you can speak to, if you wanted to, and then work it backwards from there. So yeah, you'd want, and again, this is where it becomes a bit of a headache for people, because it takes a lot of setup, a lot of kind of management, a lot of, keeping on top of, with kind of technical setups and all those kind of things. Which, people just haven't really got time to worry about and mess around with, which is why, organizations like ours exist. But, yes, you'll need a lot more kind of secondary domains if you want to be sending 20,000 emails a month than you would if you were sending 5,000 emails a month. It just kind of translates to the size of your market, really, and you kind of do the maths backwards.
Yeah. And I guess, part of that is how defined your ICP, but more so your messaging and your offering, right? Because you don't want to just blast everything all at once if you haven't validated that messaging is going to land, right?
Yeah.
So that's the additional benefit of validating.
Yeah. So that's kind of the other benefit of the email channel, and again, this is why it's been so badly abused, is because it's probably the most cost effective way to test that messaging and test that kind of offer, you know, before you even think about SEO or paid ads or anything where you're literally just burning tens of thousands of pounds just to figure something out. Email is substantially cheaper, and, with the right segmentation and, with enough kind of structure to what you're doing, you can very quickly validate that messaging and the audience that things are really resonating with. And then, as you said, from there, you can scale it to the moon, as much as much of an audience as you've got. Once you've got that proof of concept, then it's kind of good from there.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious about what you said, optimizing for conversations rather than conversions.
Yeah.
Can you say that? I mean, in terms of like language that you're using, yeah. Can you talk about that a bit?
So, yeah, I mean, you've been in the sales for years, so you'll remember this, but there was a time where everybody would be ending their emails with, have you got 15 minutes for a call? Do you want to jump on a 30-minute call? Let's have a Zoom. Let's have a chat. All of it is what we call like a hard call to action. It's just kind of, here's the email. Here is a massive ask on front, but for, zero, nothing else. Just, I've given you no value. Here's a massive ask. And don't get me wrong, if you're working for kind of, an enterprise level company that's kind of like an industry leader or a unicorn that's just kind of got the attention of the masses, then yeah, you might be able to turn around and go, hey, we're us. Here's my Calendly. Cheers. For everybody else, it's not going to work. The days of being able to just kind of go, yeah, have you got 30 minutes? But nobody's got 30 minutes or nobody's got 15 minutes for a call. Otherwise everybody will be sat in prospect meetings, nobody doing any work, and the kind of industry just collapse and die. So the whole idea is, what's happened with all the kind of high volume misuse of email is that it's no longer a transactional channel. Email works best when you're essentially getting in front of people and opening the doors to a conversation, and then you need to pick up the phone. I mean, this will make a really good soundbite for you. It's the email guy telling you that 80% of reps' time should probably be spent on the phone. So that'd be fun. But the reason I say that is because a lot of the, with proper list building, a proper infrastructure and proper targeting, reps don't have to be doing their own thing with kind of emails and lists and what have you. What it should be able to do is be kind of centralized for the entire organization, split between however many reps, and email will carry from that initial outreach to the expression of interest. It might not be a yes, we're buying now, or yes, I want a demo, but it will be enough of what we call a positive response or a positive sentiment for a sales rep to turn around and go, cool, there's some interest there. I need to follow up. I need to qualify. I need to nurture. I need to do whatever. So instead of going, Mark, I do this, you do cold calls to sales, I do emails. You could use my stuff. Do you want to jump on a demo? I'll show you how it works. I'd probably frame it more in the case of, given what you do, email seems to go hand in hand with the service you provide. We've helped other organizations like yourself build out infrastructures where, they can send emails alongside their calling, so they can spend most of their time doing what they're good at. Is this something you've looked at? Would you like some more information about it? Can I show you how we've done this? So a lot more of a kind of hands-off kind of approach, or a bit low pressure, basically. What's the old adage that people put on the VCR social media? You don't ask somebody to marry you on the first day. It's kind of a bit, but you're not going to walk up to somebody and go, hi, I'm Mark, will you marry me? It's a little bit, whoa, hang on a minute, you're crazy. So it's getting that positive sentiment and then being able to, pick up the phone and actually nurture that. That's where it kind of has its strength.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really good actually. And, I've tried every approach under the sun. Like you say, I remember being able to just blast out a load of emails, follow it up with like a thoughts bump. And it's enough to get the results.
I'm gonna jump in there. I agree. Like, as you said, thoughts is you've been on LinkedIn long enough, you know what the flavor of the month was for every kind of quarter for the last 3 years. It's great though, is subject line being quick question. Everybody loved that for 3 months and then everybody hated it. Lavender got stupidly popular a couple of years ago, and then everybody kind of used the exact Lavender framework. Don't get me wrong, it's fantastic. Tool highly recommended for people who are kind of really, unsure, kind of early stage is great. But, when everything gets to a critical mass, doesn't it? It becomes super popular, everybody does it, and then it becomes a bit less effective. So you kind of cycle. But that thoughts thing, one follow-up that's just like, would this be of interest or something? Fine, everybody can miss an email. You've got, everybody's inbox look like yours and mine. It's not surprised that you might miss an email here and there, especially if you're not expecting it. But when you kind of get these, you probably had it on LinkedIn as well, or emails where you get 4 or 5 emails. The last 4 emails are just, hello, did you get my message? Just circling back here.
Yeah, just circling back to, yeah, I mean, I
Do that.
starting call runnings, like, and
Yeah.
we're getting them straight away from like week 1. We're getting sounds. I just wanted to circle back to check with you that you had read my email. Did you? Yeah. So I get it.
Exactly. So the best way to, again, and if you send loads of follow-ups like that, all they're going to do is report you as spam, which is the worst thing that can happen to your deliverability. Dirty data is the second worst. The worst thing is if they press the button and tell Google and Microsoft, this is spam, I don't want to hear from you again. You're just asking for trouble.
I think I'm too nice. I'm too soft because, like, I get these emails. I don't want to mark it as spam because I feel bad. I'm just like, at the end of that, the other end of that email is someone who's like trying to hit their target. They're struggling like the rest of us. And
I mean, you're lucky. You're in that bubble though. You know the ramifications. To anybody else, they just see it and they're just like, and don't get me wrong. If you're going to send 5 emails and 4 of them are saying just circling back, then probably deserve to get spam and blacklisted. To be honest, I mean, the best way to kind of think about it as well, for as you said, it will help with deliverability or help with responses. If you're not adding any, I hate saying adding value because it's just such an overused soundbite, but if there's nothing of value or of interest or relevance in that next email or something that you can tie into the first email, then you probably shouldn't be sending it, because otherwise it's just going to end up getting ignored. You're going to be sending more emails, getting less responses, and more likely to be getting reported as spams. Always a good thing to keep in mind.
But that's where you then pick up the phone or you use LinkedIn and right? Instead of just blindly hammering one channel. It's like we started recording, right? About combining phone, email, whatever. Because as with what we do, right? Every people, you just can't get them on the phone. They just won't answer.
That's it.
No, yeah.
Talking about LinkedIn flavors of the month and things, that I Gauge sequence, was it a couple of years ago? You'll have seen it floating around. It's just, where people have these like 18 touch points over 10 days across 4 channels, which is, great. It's a little bit intensive, but that idea still works. Send somebody an email, and then if you're going to send them a DM on LinkedIn, you can say, hey, send you this email, just get blah, blah. And then when you phone them, it's like, send that connection request on LinkedIn. There's actual relevance, which is why the whole multi-channel approach works.
Yeah.
It's just, you need to make sure that your ducks are in a row with all of it, before you kind of fail before you start. Otherwise, it's just got to get the basics right.
Yeah, those sequences were kind of like the 2021 equivalent of like ridiculous N8N or Clay workflows that you see.
That's it. Yeah. Now you see the 400-page, no workflow, but you can sack your entire sales team. It's funny thing for me about those, and a tangent, but worth mentioning. I see so many things about AI kind of taking over, jobs and emails and SDR roles and what have you. I see so much stuff about good pipeline. I'm yet to see anybody come out with kind of how much that's converted to kind of ARR. Well, from conversions, I've not seen. I mean, I think you actually made a post a couple of weeks ago, just kind of testing the waters to see how the what was the ROI for people with AI SDRs or AI kind of salespeople. And I think the responses or lack of spoke for themselves, really. It's got its place, but don't get me wrong. I don't think we're all getting replaced by a make and an Airtable just yet. I think we're okay.
Where does that sort of stuff have its place? I mean, maybe not the AI SDR stuff, but like, you see these elaborate workflows, whether it's waterfall enrichments and all these, I'm showing my ignorance here. I know what's possible or some moments, but what do they have their place? Is it just a gimmick? Is it just basically people that are scared to just pick up the phone or to actually learn about what you're doing, for example?
as much as I'd like to kind of cause an absolute firestorm and set people off, I don't think it's a gimmick. Again, there is definitely, there are agency owners way, way, way more sophisticated than me in terms of kind of AI integrations and what have you. But there are so many kind of tools out there that you can use to, kind of enable your outreach and kind of evolve what you're doing. But again, everybody doing it, manually trying to go through it, figuring it all out, learning the tools, getting them done. It does take forever. But with a combination of, the reason Clay is so, massively popular now is because it's found a way to kind of facilitate all of these kind of, platforms into one. You can kind of link everything together. It's kind of like not a marketplace, but it kind of hubs everything together, and it just makes it a lot more accessible. But yeah, the workflows are great. What AI is really good for, and I take as much advantage as I can myself, is to do the really kind of time intensive, but kind of long winded, low benefit kind of stuff. So the manual tasks, the kind of, data verifications and what have you. You don't want to be sitting there line by line checking things. You don't want to be, checking one person's LinkedIn profile for this piece of information to, some SDRs before a call, you'll go on LinkedIn, you'll research, what they're doing, get a bit of background information before you make a phone call to somebody. There are ways you can literally, automate all of that, put it into a Google Sheet, and then you can take that Google Sheet, put it into a sequencer, which will then pull that information from the Google Sheet into the email sequence, and you get nice bespoke emails based on whatever they've found. So they are fantastic. And I think it's the same as, people using ChatGPT to inspire, posts or content or what have you. It's great for inspiration. It's great as a baseline, but it always needs a human at the other end of it just to sense check it, because it's not perfect and it's very literal. It doesn't understand how humans think. It just follows process A to B and then will not deviate. So it can save a lot of time, and it can do a lot of things to, help do some really quite sophisticated things without having to, either paying people for hours and hours of work that's going to make them pull their hair out, or, have to do it manually yourself. And it can really elevate it, but it can't just be left to do its own thing, which is where I think we're kind of, if the old school way, which is like a, phone and a Rolodex was a 1 and AI SDRs are a 10, we're probably at like a 7. We've got plenty of, there's platforms for everything, website visitors, not for the UK because, that's against the law, but any US clients or what have you, you can, find out who your website visitors are. You can then, find their information through LinkedIn. Then you can run lookalike searches for current clients. And there's platforms that will show you, here's the 100, 200 people that are very, very similar to the company you've just mentioned. And you can create a list based off that. But there's, and all of these things can be, automated or, put through a workflow to save you time. And then, they can all be pulled into a sequencer to create a really nice, almost bespoke email, which again will help with deliverability because it's not a mass template. So yeah, it's definitely got its place, but I don't think it's gonna, replace it. It can't replace the human just yet. There's not quite enough sophistication.
Yeah, what I'm getting from this is for businesses that want to embrace this stuff, and maybe just bring it back specifically to the work you do, it isn't like gone are the days where, you've got, I say gone are the days, the companies are still doing it. Basically, you've got your predictable revenue model, your SDRs, booking meetings, but the SDRs obviously, and obviously AEs are hunting for their own pipeline as well. They're banging out their own emails, right? They're just kind of making it up as they go along. There's no real system behind it. But what I'm thinking is, like, from what you're saying, there needs to be a dedicated personal team resource for this, right? We need to take it off of the hands of people so that they can focus on just having the quality conversations, mostly over the phone. So yeah, what do you think in terms of like, how should that look in a business? I know obviously you're going to want to talk about like, well, outsource it to someone like you. Yeah, like, and it just kind of ties into like, because what I was also going to ask you is like, what are the, not thinking about your ICP, who you can really help. Hopefully some of them are watching this or listening to this. Like, what are the things you see? where they say, look, take it off of their hands, let me handle it. Like, yeah, tell us
Yeah.
about it.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it's good because I'm clearly conveying the message properly, because that's precisely where that's the hill I've kind of elected to die on over the last couple of years, is that, predict revenue model, while it, still has some merit, it's not as effective as it once was. And, SDRs, the thing is, everybody has learned how to use a sequencer and send loads of emails. Unless I'm living in an echo chamber, which might be true because, a lot of my LinkedIn network are probably also in the email and kind of agency space. But people aren't probably picking up the phone as much as they were or should be, which means the channel's a lot quieter. I see quite a lot of posts from people saying, oh, we had this job application, I had 600 applications, I had 12 LinkedIn DMs, and I had 2 people phone. Guess which 2 people wanted? It's like, there's, that is where, if you want to make the most money out of your reps, I believe that's where you want them to be. You're paying them, a good load of money in their bonus on, getting these conversations. The fastest way to get these is through the phone, which sounds silly coming from an email guy, but that's just where email kind of can support that. It's just email can hit a scale that even a person with a power dialer can't. You can sit there with a parallel dialer all day as much as you want to. You're still not going to be able to hit the same numbers as email will be for anywhere near the price. So, rather than, if you want to do it the internal way, as you said, you would need like a dedicated, people call it go-to-market engineers, you're doing the automation stuff. Basically, it's just a kind of almost like a sales and marketing manager whose just sole responsibility will be curating the data lists, setting up the sequences under the aliases of whoever the reps are, managing the sequences, managing the data, and then any replies that come in, just routing them to the CRM for that relevant rep to just put into the pipeline and follow up. That can be done by one person for an entire team. I've got a couple of clients, in the recruitment space, that have large teams of consultants, but they don't want them spending all their time kind of pulling data lists and sending emails. They want to do fulfillment, they want to be placing people, they want to be making massive commissions, which I understand because that's the whole point. So rather than them either having to spend their time doing it or bring somebody in internally to manage it all and worry about it, you can centralize the entire operation and get those guys on the phones, talk to people. And if they are sending an email, it's a one-to-one email or a warm email following up from the conversation you've had on the phone, which is going to deliver because you've already spoken to them and they've given you their email address. So that works nicely as well. So yeah, that's exactly how it should be. It can be used to augment what's already there, make it a lot more efficient. But it's not going to, place anybody anytime soon. And it's just, there's a lot of, you've only got so many hours in a day. Every SDR, even, AEs that are self-sourcing, you've not got a lot of time in the day. The last thing you want to be doing is kind of setting up sequences for a couple of days to kind of do that. You'd want to be spending it on the phone. I'm sure you'll agree with core earnings. That's where you're spending your time if you want to be generating revenue this quarter, not next.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess whoever is filling that new kind of whatever GTM engineer, whatever role, whatever you want to call it, there needs to be someone who's not just tech focused, but understands, like kind of as you've spoken about, the human element, right, of the messaging, of thinking more around conversations rather than conversions, and understanding their place in the overall kind of multi-channel thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
LinkedIn, whatever. It can't just be someone who's sat there very myopic, right? So
don't get me wrong. They need to be, severely like on top of it. And, the deliverability side is very technical. And, as you said, it changes regularly. So they need to be on top of things and, monitoring what's going on and reacting quickly and being quite au fait with a lot of the tools that can augment things. But as you said, they can't live in a silo. It's a very collaborative role. And I think that's where it's going to be most effective. Is where, they understand the human element. They've got it, if they're helping send the emails out on behalf of marketing, they understand the marketing side. If it's just, sales for SDRs and AEs, they need to kind of understand the sales process, understand that kind of angle, because then you can make sure that what is going out matches the message that they're trying to convey when they talk to people on the phone. It needs to sound like the person that you're sending emails on behalf of. So, it does take a little bit of awareness on top of the tech kind of savviness. But yeah, I think that the people that kind of nail that middle ground are going to have are going to be very sought after in the next couple of years as kind of AI augments everything and makes doing a lot of things at scale a lot quicker if you know what you're doing. So there's going to be a select few people who are just going to clean up, I would say.
Including your good self, of course.
Possibly, if you don't want to bring somebody internally for, 70 grand a year plus whatever bonuses, outsource it to somebody who's, spent the time in the coal mines. But yeah, that's where, as you said earlier, people that we kind of can help with, either large scale organizations where it's just becoming this all consuming monster that's taking up hours and hours that, nobody in their role has any time to kind of spend figuring out all this stuff and, doing the technical side, watching the deliverability, managing technical side of things, rotating domains, putting new mailboxes in, what have you. That's great to kind of outsource that because then you can streamline the team's efforts, you can keep growing the company that way while everything's kind of being handled in a kind of, central hub. Or the other way, a kind of, the other side of the coin, the kind of seed series A kind of companies where you've got a bit of an idea of what's going on. You've got this, thought and this kind of MVP or whatever they want to call it in the SaaS world. You've got this offer that you think is going to resonate, but you just need to get it out there. Emails are the easiest channel to do that testing. So if you're willing to give it, 3 to 6 months to really define your offer for a lot cheaper than it would be on any other channel, then email's a great way to go. And especially when you're investor backed, they're going to want to see results kind of yesterday. So, speed to execution is massive. So being able to run all those kind of tests and run everything very quickly and establish that will help and so it seems a bit two ends of the spectrum, but yeah, it's got its merits in all places. So it's definitely something that needs to, if you're not evolving with it and you're still kind of sending everything through HubSpot or through your Apollo sequencer, you're in trouble.
Your days are numbered.
That's it, exactly.
All right, fine. Awesome. Thanks for your time. A couple of things here. Please like, comment, subscribe. I've been remembering to say that every episode recently. I thought we're doing like 25 without saying it. So please subscribe. And Scot is Fox Red Outbound. Is it .com?
.co.uk, but the .com will redirect. So
okay, .co.uk. So check it out. You can find Scot on LinkedIn, of course. Post some really useful stuff as well if you got to try and do some of this stuff yourself. Scot, before we go, any parting words? Anything else you wanna shill or any advice you want to give?
No shilling. Just I think the bits we touched on earlier are kind of the more important bits. Email is still a really, really vital channel for outreach. I know people say they don't read them or they're easy to ignore. It's still really effective if you're doing it properly. It's worth making the effort. And if you're not sure where to start, as Mark said, I'm on LinkedIn. We've got a website. Come find us. I'll point you in the right direction.
Sweet. Nice. All right. Cheers, Scot. Pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Let's talk to you, mate. Take care.